Lives of the Most Eminent Painters, Sculptors, and Architects by Giorgio Vasari.
Life of Andrea Mantegna, painter of Mantua. How great is the effect of reward on talent is known to him who labours valiantly and receives a certain measure of recompense. For he feels neither discomfort, nor hardship, nor fatigue, when he expects honour and reward for them. Nay, what is more, they render his talent every day more renowned and illustrious. It is true, indeed, that there is not always found one to recognize, esteem, and remunerate it as that of Andrea Mantegna was recognized. This man was born from very humble stock in the district of Mantua, and although as a boy he was occupied in grazing herds, he was so greatly exalted by destiny and by his merit that he attained to the honourable rank of chevalier, as will be told in the proper place. When almost full grown, he was taken to the city, where he applied himself to painting under Jacopo Bellini, a painter of Padua, who, as it is written in a Latin letter from Messer Girolamo Campagnola to Messer Leonico Timeo, a Greek philosopher, wherein he gives him information about certain old painters who served the family of Carrara, lords of Padua, took him into his house, and a little time afterwards, having recognized the beauty of his intelligence, adopted him as his son. Now this Squarcione knew that he himself was not the most able painter in the world, wherefore, to the end that Andrea might learn more than he himself knew, he made him practice much on casts taken from ancient statues, and on pictures painted upon canvas which he caused to be brought from divers places, particularly from Tuscany and from Rome. By these and other methods, therefore, Andrea learnt not a little in his youth, and the competition of Marco Zoppo of Bologna, Dario da Treviso, and Niccolò Pizzolo of Padua, disciples of his master and adoptive father, was of no small assistance to him, and a stimulus to his studies. Now after Andrea, who was then no more than 17 years of age, had painted the panel of the high altar of Santa Sofia in Padua, which appears wrought by a mature and well-practised master, and not by a youth, Squarcione was commissioned to paint the chapel of San Cristofano, which is in the church of the Eremite friars of Sant'Agostino in Padua, and he gave the work to the said Niccolò Pizzolo and to Andrea. Niccolò made therein a God the Father seated in majesty between the doctors of the church, and these paintings were afterwards held to be in no way inferior to those that Andrea executed there. And in truth, if Niccolò, whose works were few, but all good, had taken as much delight in painting as he did in arms, he would have become excellent, and might perchance have lived much longer than he did. For he was ever under arms and had many enemies, and one day, when returning from work, he was attacked and slain by treachery. Niccolò left no other works that I know of, save another God the Father in the chapel of Urbano Perfetto. Andrea, thus left alone in the said chapel, painted the 4 evangelists, which were held very beautiful. By reason of this and other works, Andrea began to be watched with great expectation, and with hopes that he would attain to that success to which he actually did attain. Wherefore Jacopo Bellini, the Venetian painter, father of Gentile and Giovanni, and rival of Squarcione, contrived to get him to marry his daughter, the sister of Gentile. Hearing this, Squarcione fell into such disdain against Andrea that they were enemies ever afterwards, and in proportion as Squarcione had formerly been ever praising the works of Andrea, so from that day onward did he ever decry them in public. Above all did he censure without reserve the pictures that Andrea had made in the said chapel of San Cristofano, saying that they were worthless, because in making them he had imitated the ancient works in marble, from which it is not possible to learn painting perfectly, for the reason that stone is ever from its very essence hard, and never has that tender softness that is found in flesh and in things of nature, which are pliant and move in various ways. Adding that Andrea would have made those figures much better, and that they would have been more perfect, if he had given them the colour of marble and not such a quantity of colours, because his pictures resembled not living figures, but ancient statues of marble, or other such like things. This censure piqued the mind of Andrea, but on the other hand it was of great service to him, for, recognizing that Squarcione was in great measure speaking the truth, he set himself to portray living people, and made so much progress in this art that, in a scene which still remained to be painted in the said chapel, he showed that he could wrest the good from living and natural objects no less than from those wrought by art. But for all this, Andrea was ever of the opinion that the good ancient statues were more perfect and had greater beauty in their various parts than is shown by nature, since, as he judged and seemed to see from those statues, the excellent masters of old had wrested from living people all the perfection of nature, which rarely assembles and unites all possible beauty into one single body, so that it is necessary to take one part from one body and another part from another. In addition to this, it appeared to him that the statues were more complete and more thorough in the muscles, veins, nerves, and other particulars, which nature, covering their sharpness somewhat with the tenderness and softness of flesh, sometimes makes less evident, save perchance in the body of an old man or in one greatly emaciated. But such bodies, for other reasons, are avoided by craftsmen. And that he was greatly enamoured of this opinion is recognized from his works, in which, in truth, the manner is seen to be somewhat hard and sometimes suggesting stone rather than living flesh. Be this as it may, in this last scene, which gave infinite satisfaction, Andrea portrayed Squarcione in an ugly and corpulent figure, lance and sword in hand. In the same work he portrayed the Florentine Noferi, son of Messer Palla Strozzi, Messer Girolamo della Valle, a most excellent physician, Messer Bonifacio Fuzzimelia, doctor of laws, Niccolo, goldsmith to Pope Innocent VIII, and Baldassare del Leccio, all very much his friends, whom he represented clad in white armour, burnished and resplendent, as real armour is, and truly with a beautiful manner. He also portrayed there the Chevalier Messer Bonramino, and a certain Bishop of Hungary, a man wholly witless, who would wander about Rome all day, and then at night would lie down to sleep like a beast in a stable. And he made a portrait of Marsilio Pazzo in the person of the executioner, who is cutting off the head of St. James, together with one of himself. This work, in short, by reason of its excellence, brought him a very great name. The while that he was working on this chapel, he also painted a panel, which was placed on the altar of San Luca in Santa Justina, and afterwards he wrought in fresco the arch that is over the door of San Antonino, on which he wrote his name. In Verona he painted a panel for the altar of San Cristofano and Sant' Antonio, and he made some figures at the corner of the Piazza della Paglia. In Santa Maria in Organo, for the monks of Monte Oliveto, he painted the panel of the high altar, which is most beautiful, and likewise that of Saint Zeno. And among other things that he wrought while living in Verona and sent to various places, one, which came into the hands of an abbot of the Abbey of Fiesole, his friend and relative, was a picture containing a half-length Madonna with the Child in her arms, and certain heads of angels singing, wrought with admirable grace, which picture, now to be seen in the library of that place, has been held from that time to our own to be a rare thing. Now, the while that he lived in Mantua, he had laboured much in the service of the Marquis Lodovico Gonzago, and that lord, who always showed no little esteem and favour towards the talent of Andrea, caused him to paint a little panel for the chapel of the castle of Mantua, in which panel there are scenes with figures not very large, but most beautiful. In the same place are many figures foreshortened from below upwards, which are greatly extolled. For although his treatment of the draperies was somewhat hard and precise, and his manner rather dry, yet everything there is seen to have been wrought with much art and diligence. For the same Marquis, in a hall of the Palace of San Sebastiano in Mantua, he painted the Triumph of Caesar, which is the best thing that he ever executed. In this work we see, grouped with most beautiful design in the Triumph, the ornate and lovely car, the man who is vituperating the triumphant Caesar, and the relatives, the perfumes, the incense, the sacrifices, the priests, the bulls crowned for sacrifice, the prisoners, the booty won by the soldiers, the ranks of the squadrons, the elephants, the spoils, the victories, the cities and fortresses counterfeited in various cars, with an infinity of trophies borne on spears, and a variety of helmets and body armour, headdresses and ornaments and vases innumerable. And in the multitude of spectators is a woman holding the hand of a boy, who, having pierced his foot with a thorn, is showing it, weeping, to his mother, in a graceful and very lifelike manner. Andrea, as I may have pointed out elsewhere, had a good and beautiful idea in this scene, for, having set the plane on which the figures stood higher than the level of the eye, he placed the feet of the foremost on the outer edge and outline of that plane, making the others recede inwards little by little, so that their feet and legs were lost to sight in the proportion required by the point of view. And so, too, with the spoils, vases, and other instruments and ornaments, of which he showed only the lower part, concealing the upper, as was required by the rules of perspective, which same consideration was also observed with much diligence by Andrea degli Impicciati, in the Last Supper, which is in the refectory of Santa Maria Nuova. Wherefore it is seen that in that age these able masters set about investigating with much subtlety and imitating with great labour the true properties of natural objects. And this whole work, to put it briefly, is as beautiful and as well wrought as it could be, so that if the Marquis loved Andrea before, he loved and honoured him much more ever afterwards. What is more, he became so famous thereby that Pope Innocent VIII, hearing of his excellence in painting and of the other good qualities wherewith he was so marvellously endowed, sent for him, even as he was sending for many others, to the end that he might adorn with his pictures the walls of the Belvedere, the building of which had just been finished. Having gone to Rome then, greatly favoured and recommended by the Marquis, who made him a chevalier in order to honour him the more, he was received lovingly by that pontiff, and straightway commissioned to paint a little chapel that is in the said place. This he executed with diligence and love, and with such minuteness that the vaulting and the walls appear rather illuminated than painted, and the largest figures that are therein, which he painted in fresco, like the others, are over the altar, representing the baptism of Christ by St. John, with many people around, who are showing by taking off their clothes that they wish to be baptized. Among these is one who, seeking to draw off a stocking that has stuck to his leg through sweat, has crossed that leg over the other, and is drawing the stocking off inside out, with such great effort and difficulty, that both are seen clearly in his face, which bizarre fancy caused marvel to all that saw it in those times. It is said that this Pope, by reason of his many affairs, did not pay Mantegna as often as he would have liked, and that therefore, while painting certain virtues in terretta in that work, he made a figure of discretion among the rest. Whereupon the Pope, having gone one day to see the work, asked Andrea what figure that was. To which Andrea answered that it was discretion, and the Pope added, "If thou wouldst have her suitably accompanied, put Patience beside her." The painter understood what the meaning of the Holy Father was, and he never said another word. The work finished, the Pope sent him back to the Duke with much favour and honourable rewards. The while that Andrea was working in Rome, he painted, besides the said chapel, a little picture of the Madonna with the Child sleeping in her arms, and within certain caverns in the landscape, which is a mountain, he made some stone cutters quarrying stone for various purposes, all wrought with such delicacy and such great patience, that it does not seem possible for such work to be done with the thin point of a brush. This picture is now in the possession of the most illustrious Lord Don Francesco Medici, Prince of Florence, who holds it among his dearest treasures. In our book is a drawing by the hand of Andrea on a half sheet of royal folio, finished in chiaroscuro, wherein is a Judith who is putting the head of Holofernes into the wallet of her Moorish slave girl, which chiaroscuro is executed in a manner no longer used, for he left the paper white to serve for the light in place of white lead, and that so delicately that the separate hairs and other minute details are seen therein, no less than if they had been wrought with much diligence by the brush. Wherefore, in a certain sense, this may be called rather a work in colour than a drawing. The same man, like Pollaiolo, delighted in engraving on copper, and among other things he made engravings of his own triumphs, which were then held in great account, since nothing better had been seen. One of the last works that he executed was a panel picture for Santa Maria della Vittoria, a church built after the direction and design of Andrea by the Marquis Francesco, in memory of the victory that he gained on the river Taro, when he was general of the Venetian forces against the French. In this panel, which was wrought in distemper and placed on the high altar, there is painted the Madonna with the Child seated on a pedestal, and below are St. Michael Agnolo, Santa Anna, and Joachim, who are presenting the Marquis, who is portrayed from life so well that he appears alive, to the Madonna, who is offering him her hand. Which picture, even as it gave and still continues to give universal pleasure, also satisfied the Marquis so well that he rewarded most liberally the talent and labour of Andrea, who, having been remunerated by princes for all his works, was able to maintain his rank of chevalier most honourably up to the end of his life. Andrea had competitors in Lorenzo da Lendinara, who was held in Padua to be an excellent painter, and who also wrought some things in terracotta for the Church of San Antonio, and in certain others of no great worth. He was ever the friend of Dario da Treviso and Marco Zoppo of Bologna, since he had been brought up with them under the discipline of Squarcione. For the Friars Minor of Padua, this Marco painted a loggia which serves as their chapter house. And at Pesaro he painted a panel that is now in the new church of San Giovanni Evangelista, besides portraying in a picture Guidobaldo da Montefeltro, at the time when he was captain of the Florentines. A friend of Mantegna's, likewise, was Stefano, a painter of Ferrara, whose works were few but passing good, and by his hand is the adornment of the sarcophagus of St. Anthony to be seen in Padua, with the Virgin Mary, that is called the Vergine del Pilastro. But to return to Andrea himself, he built a very beautiful house in Mantua for his own use, which he adorned with paintings and enjoyed while he lived. Finally he died in 1517, at the age of 66, and was buried with honourable obsequies in St. Andrea, and on his tomb, over which stands his portrait in bronze, there was placed the following epitaph: Esse parum hunc noris, si non preponis, appelli, enia mantine qui simulacra vides. Andrea was so kindly and praiseworthy in all his actions, that his memory will ever live, not only in his own country, but in the whole world. Wherefore he well deserved, no less for the sweetness of his ways than for his excellence in painting, to be celebrated by Ariosto at the beginning of his 33rd canto, where he numbers him among the most illustrious painters of his time, saying, Leonardo, Andrea Mantegna, Gian Bellino. This master showed painters a much better method of foreshortening figures from below upwards, which was truly a difficult and ingenious invention. And he also took delight, as has been said, in engraving figures on copper for printing, a method of truly rare value, by means of which the world has been able to see not only the Bacchanalia, the battle of marine monsters, the deposition from the cross, the burial of Christ and his resurrection with Longinus and St. Andrew, works by Mantegna himself, but also the manners of all the craftsmen who have ever lived.